I'm kind of trying to still develop my plot yet and develop my characters. So it's a work in progress.
That is so neat. So neat how a man of action can become a man of letters. I love that. I really love that. And I should introduce you to my daughter, Ellie Depastino.
Hi, it's good to meet you.
Hi, Ellie. Nice to meet you too.
And we are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. Hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. We are going to have a conversation tonight with Colonel George W. Kohn, who's a retired Air Force officer and pilot, F-4 pilot, who wrote a memoir. You probably caught some of this conversation if you're watching on social media. A wonderfully written memoir called Vector to Destiny, and I can't say it's rare to have a well-written military memoir, but it's rare to have such a literary military memoir. In other words, there are literary devices that George uses that are really effective. And we like to talk about books. I'm always encouraging veterans to write their stories. And so I think this will come up in our conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. I appreciate your kind comments. My intent with the story was to make it an enjoyable read, and so to do that, I kind of wanted to add some humor and maybe some suspense and some other features, just to keep the reader's interest in there. And so that was my goal. I hope it came out in the story.
Well, we are going
to have. We're just about ready to go live. So I'll start the theme music and let everyone in.
Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to VBC Happy Hour on this very chilly, in Pittsburgh at least, Monday night, January 10th. I'm grateful for you all tuning in tonight. I do have to let you know that I did a bit of false advertising in the weeks leading up to tonight. We had originally planned to do a program on weapons control, United States Air Force weapons control. And hey, Elle, if you could stop sharing your sound, then I could share my screen.
There we go, yeah.
All right, there we go. Because I do want to show that this is what we had planned to do tonight, was to have Paul Hauser here, who's wrote this wonderful book, Inherently Dangerous, really about his life in the Air Force, but also about the occupation, the military occupation of weapons control, which is something that, even though I've been working with veterans for 13 years and I've taught courses on the Vietnam War and World War II, it's not something I knew anything about. And it really is fascinating to me. And we managed to get some other weapons controllers to come and talk about their work with radar scopes. And, they're essentially, as he describes it, as Paul describes it, it's air traffic control, except you're trying to bring planes close to each other in a combat situation. And so it's inherently dangerous work. And we're going to have the conversation, but Paul is ill, so he will not be able to join us tonight. So we just thought we'd postpone this for another date. I will let you know when we reschedule. And George Kohn has been just generous enough and gracious enough to fill in at the last minute. And George is the author of this really fine memoir, Vector to Destiny, Journey of a Vietnam F-4 Fighter Pilot. And what strikes me, and I was trying to squeeze it out of him, how did he learn to write so well? As you know, I have intense jealousy and resentment, I guess the right word, jealousy and resentment for those who are not professional writers, but write well, because it means that what I do as a profession actually isn't that hard. So, but it is humbling when somebody learns to fly an airplane and then all in combat, and then also could write really well. And
George, try the word envy.
Thank you, Michael. See, a real writer would know the right word. It makes me envious. That talent makes me envious, and I want to talk to George about how he came to write the book and understand how to write a book. So we're gonna get to that, and we're gonna get to George. But I do want to say hi to George. George. Hello.
George's video froze and he just logged off. So I'm hoping he will be with us in a couple minutes here.
Oh boy, lightning didn't strike, did it? Like it did with our one guest a couple weeks ago. Lightning struck and he was out for the duration. Okay, so while we wait for George to come back, let me. Oh, hey, Don Nemchik, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Good evening, everyone. Todd, the reason I raised my hand, I noticed that you guys wanted to talk about the extension of the Navy basic training from 8 weeks to 10 weeks.
Yes, look at this. Yep.
Being an old salt that I am, I have a couple comments on it if you'd like to hear them.
Perfect. That's exactly where I was going, Don. Yeah, let me just set this up a little bit. I read this headline, Navy boot camp lengthened to 10 weeks. And then I read the article and it said that Navy boot camp was currently 8 weeks and was going to be extended to 10. I didn't know it was only 8 weeks long. I thought it was longer than that.
Well, back in the day, I went 13 weeks. Now, of course, that was 1970. And the training was obviously somewhat different because the world's different now, as is the military. And ironically, I contacted my old company commander. Some people call them drill instructors. In the Navy, we call them company commanders, and asked what his thoughts were, because he was a young boatswain's mate first class, just coming back from his tour of duty in Vietnam when he took over our company, Company 352. He was hard on us, but he was extremely fair because he knew what we were going to be confronting in the fleet and on shore duty if we were detailed over to Southeast Asia. He pushed us hard. We were on that grinder all the time, faces on the dirt, doing the push-ups, pushing the piece, etc. I knew all the words when I went into boot camp, but I didn't know they could be used multiple times in one sentence. But,
unique combinations.
I think those days have gone, and perhaps that's a good thing. But what the Navy is doing is they're extending the recruit training to have sailors receive some additional training in, we'll just say, life skills. Now it's sexual harassment. You got a co-ed Navy now. That brings a host of problems.
Whole new set of issues. That's right.
Whole new set of issues. Suicide awareness, which is a huge issue.
Right.
Some of these young sailors don't have the personal life skills. For example, outside many bases are the shysters, the used car dealers that'll sell them that used car at 25% interest rate, the cheap jewelry salesmen. These kids don't know how to balance a checking account, or even if they need a checking account in some places. So these life skills, I think, are important. I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't look for it as a demeaning of the military or softening of the military. I just think that it's a good thing to get our sailors ready for the fleet. They often say that these guys coming out of 8 weeks basic training now, especially with COVID, they got masks on, they got a laptop or a iPad with them, and they get onto the fleet. Now it's a whole different world. There's haranguing going on. Many times when you get to the fleet, first thing you're going to be told to do is go find a bucket of steam, or go find a left-handed monkey wrench, or do something that runs you around. And what the fellows are trying to do, not so much to make your life miserable, they're trying to see what kind of guy you are, or gal you are. Can you respond to these types of things? Are you going to be real thin-skinned? Are you going to be a guy they can depend on when the times get a little bit tough? So I think this is a good thing that the Navy is doing. And I think we monitor it closely and see what comes from the fleet, because you have to remember, the Russians and China are building their fleet to be a very, very strong Navy. We have the strongest Navy right now, and we like to keep it that way.
Yeah. So, but that still doesn't get to the question of why Navy boot camp shrunk down to 8 weeks in the first place. And I do understand, just hearing from veterans over the years, from World War II to the present, that basic training and boot camp, it's a flexible calendar, and it ranges usually from 8 weeks as the bare minimum to 13 weeks, of course, if you're a Marine. And I know that during World War II, during Korea, Vietnam, as the need for troops, the need for bodies, servicemen and women increased, they would often shrink the training down to get them overseas more quickly. So I'm just wondering, like, what the the average duration of basic training has been. I usually, when I was teaching, I would tell my students it was 10 weeks, just to give a round number. But does that about what it sounds like? I mean, Clem, I'm looking at Clem, I'm looking at Corky, Air Force, Wayne, how long was it when you were in boot camp? Let me ask Wayne. Wayne Wicks, how are you? I know that I assume that they had boot camp back in the Civil War when you were serving.
They did. They did. But I only had to go 2 weeks.
What?
2 weeks. Two.
What could you learn in 2 weeks?
The minimum skills I needed to know to be in the Navy, because I was in the Naval Reserve and I only had to go 2 weeks. And the things you remember, like buttoning your pea coat when you come out of the chow hall, because we were up there at Christmas and New Year's. And the gas chamber, oh boy, tear gas. Yeah, I remember that.
So boot camp for Navy Reserves was only 2 weeks long.
I don't know what it is now, but in '65 it was 2 weeks.
How interesting. Corky, Air Force, what was it for you?
I went through ROTC, so I went through summer camp. And it was 12 weeks at summer camp in '68,
Okay.
or '69. I'm sorry. So between my junior and senior, before my junior year, and so it was 12 weeks long, and then we went right to UPT from there, or wherever you were going.
Michael, you said 8 weeks. You put it in the chat. Eight weeks for you in the Army.
Yes, actually, I did basic training twice. First as an enlisted reservist, that was 8 weeks. And then later I went back to college, got my commission, and then went to Signal Officer Basic Course, which was also 8 weeks. And like your previous person talked about ROTC summer camp, had that whole thing too. So yeah, I went through basic. I guess you could say I went through basic 3 times.
It's got to be a piece of cake after you go through it once, right?
One measure of that was when I went through the first time, my rifle training, I scored as a marksman. That's the lowest grade. Went through the last time, I scored expert. Take it for what it's worth.
Okay. Jim Jameson, I'll ask you. Hello, Jim. I'm going to see you tomorrow night at Providence Point and giving a lecture there. Your basic training 8 weeks in the Air Force?
I want to say it was 6 or 7 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
I went in August the 1st, and after we finished what they called basic training, we were like 2 weeks waiting on orders, which was kind of much of nothing. And we had leave given. And I remember being at Edwards when the 1960 World Series was finishing up, the 7th game of the World Series. So between August the 1st and whenever that day was in October,
Right.
I had been basic training, this 2-week waiting period for orders, some leave, and then on to a new duty station.
Yeah, so that's not long at all.
Oh, I mean, nobody could understand why it was so quick.
Yeah, they were
Because
hustling
there
you
was
through.
the only
right?
thing that I kind of concluded, there was a large group of men that went off to tech school. And the
Okay.
rest of us had to wait on orders.
And you never did pass.
I'm still waiting to be qualified.
You never were qualified on a weapon.
No. I'm still waiting. They're going to call me back one of these days. Then when I did get to Edwards, there was a screw up in the orders because there was too many people assigned to what we were assigned to. and they had to wait around and redistribute us.
And
And some were moved again.
if those of you are here and wondering why we're not talking with George Kohn about flying the F-4 in Vietnam, is because we're waiting on George. George was on, he went off, and I could see Ellie is talking. Oh, here he is. Ellie is talking to him right now. So we're bringing him in. So we're doing a little bit of tap dancing here. Talking about this interesting article, I am really fascinated with how each branch of service handles that basic training differently. And Mark, you put in the chat that you have to add in, for the Army at least, advanced individualized training, AIT. That ends up being a very long 22 weeks.
No, 12 weeks. I might have mistyped that, Todd. It ends up being advanced infantry training at Fort Polk, Louisiana. I was drafted on October 27th, and I landed in Vietnam on April 3rd the next year.
Okay.
So I was part of that mass buildup that Johnson and McNamara decided was the best thing that could happen to us at that point. So it was 8 weeks in basic training and 12 in advanced infantry training.
Okay. 8 and then 12, that's 20 weeks altogether.
Yeah. At 18 and a half.
I see Gene Klebingot. Hey, Gene is joining us, and then Clem Blazowick. Gene, could you unmute yourself here? Gene is a World War II Army veteran with a fantastic story. He's in sunny, warm Naples, Florida right now, I know. I always laugh when I see Gene because his stories are so funny. This is a man who wanted desperately to do any service, but nothing at sea because he gets seasick. And he joined the Army. They put him on a tugboat, seagoing tugboat. An Army, who knew that the Army had tugboats? Let's see. Still waiting for you to unmute here, Gene, if you can. Let's go to Clem while Gene is working on that. Hey, Clem, how are you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. How you doing, Clem?
All right, here we go. Yeah, Todd, I had 8 weeks basic training and then 12 weeks of advanced individual training. But I think the AIT, the amount of time depended on just what your AIT was, your MOS was.
Okay.
In other words, somebody may, depending on the MOS, you may have only gotten 8, 10 weeks, 12 weeks. It depends on what your MOS was.
So in other words, Mark Spiradigliozzi was his MOS was infantry. Your MOS would have been a medical technician, correct?
That's correct. Right. Yes.
And so he did 12 weeks AIT. You did what?
I did 12 also, but
Okay.
mine was actually, I had 2 MOSs. I was a regular medic and then a medical technician, laboratory technician. So I had 2 MOSs.
Okay.
But it was a grand total of 12 weeks. The other thing I want to mention, I'm pretty sure it was in 1967, maybe 68, that the Army went from 8 weeks to 6 weeks of basic training. Then I guess that was because of the buildup in Vietnam.
Getting people out and over, I guess, right?
In and out of basic training fast.
Right. They needed the bodies. Gene Klebingot.
Yes. Now, when I was drafted, I was 18. I got drafted on August 2nd, 1945. The Germans had surrendered, and they were building up for the invasion of Japan. And I was assigned to I was inducted in Indian Town Gap in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And from there, I went down to Camp Wheeler, Georgia. This was an IRTC camp. There were 7 of them in the United States, the infantry replacement training centers. Camp Wheeler was one of the main ones. But anyway, your basic training, and everybody that I could understand in World War II took 6 weeks of basic training. you have to remember about 2/3 of the Army was draftees then. And to familiarize yourself with the Army, how to dress, how to salute, when to go to the bathroom, all the fundamental things.
All the how to march, all that stuff.
After that, I stayed in camp. We were in the same place, and they put me into heavy weapons on in infantry. That is the water cooled 30 caliber machine gun and the 81 mortar. Those two, and I spent 14 weeks training on those two. So my training was finished in December. Now, in World War II, if you was 18, you were not allowed to go overseas till you had 6 months in the States. And my 6 months weren't up till February. Now the war was over now, but but what they had done, I'm going off track now a little bit, but all the men were being discharged, especially they was getting, the first ones to go were married with children. They had to go, but it was costing them too much money. And they worked on, but the old veterans were by the point system. Now, what they had done to replace all these men, all the ones like the draftees, they gave us an option. So if you sign up for 3 years, we'll give you the full benefits of the GI Bill, plus 60 months of schooling. Well, I was drafted out of high school. I still needed 1 more year of school. So that's what I took. I signed up for 3 months. You could pick your place where you want to go to. They couldn't quite guarantee that. But the branch of service, whatever service, you can get. So I picked the Transportation Corps. And of course, I would like to go to Europe, and I still had a lot of relatives in the German Army. I think I had but 10 or 12 cousins, second cousins that was in the German Army. And anyway, they sent me to Panama, to the Canal Zone.
Oh yes. Oh yes. And Gene, I have pictures of you in the Canal Zone. I have pictures of you on that seagoing tugboat. I want to have you share more of your stories of serving in Panama, because they're fantastic and you remember it all. And
but anyway, the infantry was in that 6 weeks. You had to qualify on the for the M1. Now that 6 weeks, about 4 weeks were spent just on the M1.
Right.
You learned it from one end to the other and over again. So you knew it to the
4 weeks. 4 weeks for one rifle, one weapon. That's it.
Well, that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
It was probably close to it.
Yeah.
Because it only took us about 2 weeks to get to know how to go left and right, and about face, and how to put your shoes on, and a few other things.
Right.
Hey. It was all new to me, new to most of the guys.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to reintroduce our special guest tonight, who is George Kohn. George is back with us now, and he's the author of this book, Vector to Destiny, Journey of a Vietnam F-4 Fighter Pilot. George was gracious enough to join us at the last minute to fill in for our weapons control program. George, where are you joining us from? Where do you live?
You might have to unmute yourself, George.
Is that better?
Hey, here we go. How you doing, George?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Sorry about the delay there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. No problem. I'm glad that you're able to get back on.
Yeah. I don't know what happened, but the computer just died. So, but anyway, Yeah, with regard to your question, I live in Madison, Wisconsin. That's my permanent home, but right now I'm in Fort Myers Beach, Florida.
Oh, good for you, Fort Myers Beach. Oh, wonderful. It's 20 degrees here, George. I'm freezing. I'd love to be in Fort Myers. But then again, you have to live in Wisconsin where it's also cold. I've been talking about how great your book is because not that I've read the whole thing and I've just read really what's available online. When I mean great, I mean it's so beautifully written, wonderfully structured. And I want to have you, if you don't mind, I want to drop right into the middle of your story and then go back and talk about your upbringing, which is so important to your story. And then later what happens. But I'd like to ask you first, you arrive in Vietnam as a fighter pilot. Do you remember your first mission?
I don't remember the first mission. I remember some of the initial missions over there. I got there in November of 1970. And shortly after I got there, we were tasked with flying missions over Laos, where we were a self-fac. In other words, we were out there single ship. We had ordnance and we had flares, and we were assigned an area to patrol and try and pick up targets on our own. And if we saw something that looked like a possible target, we'd roll in and drop bombs on it. And then we did that three or four times, going to the tanker and then coming back and doing some more facking and going to the tanker. So that we did that for about a month over there. Those are some of my first missions.
And this was your plane? Is this the F-4, the model plane that you flew?
Oh, yes, it is. That's a nice picture.
Yeah, I know. There's so many. It turns out the F-4 Phantoms have a lot of fans because it was such an iconic fighter plane for so long through much of the Cold War, half of the Cold War. And I read an article that the last kind of active one was just retired just like 4 or 5 years ago. So it's one of these planes with this long history, and people who flew it really have strong feelings for it. What made it such a great plane?
Because it could do a variety of tasks. It's a fighter. In other words, it could do air-to-air combat. It was great as far as the bombing missions go. We could hang up to 18 500-pound bombs on it. So it was kind of a multi-purpose fighter. I think it did a great job in Vietnam. It was quite a workhorse over there.
Yeah, I think you say that when you arrived in Vietnam, you saw one with so much ordnance hanging from it, you wondered how it could ever get off the ground. For the small plane was really able to carry a lot.
Yeah, we used up a lot of runway on takeoff.
Okay, let me ask you then this. If you can't remember your first mission, can you remember the first time that the war became real to you when you were shot at, I guess? I know there was a lot of anti-aircraft fire in Vietnam.
All of my initial missions were over Laos. And at the time, Laos was the secret war. And so it wasn't something we could write home about. But we were bombing the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and that's the trail that comes out of North Vietnam. It runs down through Laos and then back into South Vietnam through the A Shau Valley. And the enemy relied on that trail to move their men and equipment down into South Vietnam. So they were very protective of that trail, and they set up a lot of anti-aircraft artillery in various spots along the trail, and so it was very, very common to experience anti-aircraft fire on our missions there.
Was it frightening?
Well, back then I was in my 20s.
Okay.
And, so I was still young and fearless, I guess, and I'm not sure on the initial missions if I would say it was frightening or if it was, I'm not sure how to categorize it, but
I
but
mean,
it certainly got your attention.
it did get your attention.
Yeah, yes, it did. So, and we were somewhat prepared and trained on how to deal with anti-aircraft firing, and so it was a matter of jinking and taking whatever countermeasures we could to prevent being fired upon. But yes, there was a number of aircraft losses in Laos as a result of the anti-aircraft artillery there, and then there was also the threat of SAMs there, and so we had to be on alert for them.
My understanding is 500 F-4s. Is it 500? Went down in the air war over Southeast Asia, or 500? Maybe it's 500 aircraft, Air Force aircraft.
Well, the last figure I saw, and I just picked this up on the internet, I Googled it, was 761 F-4s were lost in the Vietnam War.
Whoa. Okay.
Not all of those were lost due to anti-aircraft, firing. But so yeah, there was a fair number of them, and as a result, they kept replenishing the F-4s, and so the models that I flew was the ones that came right off the McDonnell Douglas production line. So they were new airplanes.
Got it. I want to open it up and have people ask questions to George Kohn about his missions. He flew 207 missions in Vietnam. Clem. You're gonna have to unmute yourself, Clem.
I'm sorry. Yeah, George, I'm curious as to the training that you got in the event you were shot down and taken as a prisoner. Especially if you were in Laos now, then that's different than being in Vietnam. If I'm correct about the territories and being taken as a prisoner.
Yeah, that's a good point. I went through Air Force Survival School. I was up in Fairchild Air Force Base, Washington, and they had a simulated prisoner of war camp up there. So that kind of prepared us in case we were ever taken as a prisoner. And then on the way over to Vietnam, we stopped at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines and went through jungle survival over there. And I think that school probably saved a lot of pilots' lives. I know one for sure that was shot down over Laos, and he was able to evade the enemy. And a lot of it was probably based on his training at that survival school. But with regard to being shot down over Laos, to the best of my knowledge, they weren't taking any prisoners. Most of what I heard, a lot of it was kind of scuttlebutt, I guess, if you call it that. That if the enemy got to you, they usually tortured you and killed you because it wasn't worth their while to transport you to North Vietnam, to Hanoi, as a prisoner. So I don't know of any POWs that came out of Laos.
Well, if I recall, I think the man who the prisoner of war who had the longest time as a prisoner, I think his last name was McDonald. I'm not 100% sure about that, but he had actually 9 years as a prisoner of war, and he was on a Spire single engine plane in I think it was like in 1966 that he was shot down in Laos, and the U.S. government said he was not a prisoner of war from Vietnam. He was on duty in a foreign country. So he was actually not considered a prisoner of war from Vietnam.
Yeah.
But yet he was a prisoner of war.
Sure. Yeah. I'm sure there were some, especially if you got shot down near the border in North Vietnam, like Chapone. That was a valley that was pretty heavily defended. That North Vietnamese used to get into Laos. And so if you were close enough to North Vietnam, I suspect that they probably would transport you up to Hanoi. But the ones that I know that were shot down, I don't know of anyone that, if they weren't rescued, I don't know of anyone that was taken prisoner.
I believe the POW you're talking about, Clem, is this man, Jim Thompson.
There it is. You're
Yeah,
right,
Glory.
Todd. I'm sorry. For
No,
some
no,
reason.
fine. The book about him is called Glory Denied, and it is quite a sad tale. And I believe there was a recent opera made about him and his life. As you can imagine, as a POW for 9 years, surviving, coming home. Oh man, it's just hard to imagine what he endured. He remained in the military, had a very unhappy life, as you can imagine. But and I do remember there being a recent opera, I think before COVID, touring about his life.
Thanks for looking that up, Todd.
Yeah, Glory Denied. Glory Denied. Look it up, guys. It's wonderful. I mean, if hard to take story, but it's one of those true stories that you can't believe he survived what he survived. Do we have other questions here? Anybody else have a question or a question for George? George, hey, Larry Googans, how are you? Larry was a backseater in Vietnam on an F-4, George.
Oh, very interesting.
George, how you doing? Larry Googans. Yeah, were you in the Triple Nickel?
No, I was in the gunfighters, 360.
Okay, because the picture the picture it showed was
right.
Triple Nickel aircraft. Whereabouts were you in Udorn?
Oh, Da Nang.
Oh, Da Nang. Okay. Oh, so you're in country. All right. Well, anyway, I was there a year before you, December 69, December 70. And I know the Ho Chi Minh Trail pretty well, too well. And I know Chapone and Bankarai and all those things. I'm sure they ring a bell. But we lost some aircraft I was at Karat. I should have said that, flying E models. But we lost some aircraft at Karat, mostly by 23 or small arms, getting down too low. You know the story. But there were a couple that got shot down in Laos, and he's right. You didn't want to stay in Laos. So I don't remember, or I can't say who went and rescued them when they went down, but they got rescued out of Laos within less than 24 hours. And I want to say the same thing George said. If you didn't get out within the first 24 hours, you were probably history. They did do some excellent work by some of those clandestine organizations that we've talked about before, Todd, to get crew members out. So I was, like I said, I was lucky enough. I was supposed to go to Cam Bay, and I got switched to Karat. And I was a little upset at the time until I got to Karat, and then I wasn't upset anymore. But I did land at Da Nang twice to refuel, and then left there as quick as I could. But I admire what you did, and welcome home, George. Thanks for your stories. I will say, Todd, that the Ho Chi Minh Trail was no paradise to working in, and I'm sure George can verify this. It was not uncommon to come back to debrief intel to say you had about 2,000 rounds of AAA shot at you that night. I should have said I flew 99 night missions, George, with Spectre and those other aircraft on and off the tanker for 3 or 4 hours. But yeah, that wasn't necessarily every night, Todd,
right.
but we got shot at every time we flew in Laos. I mean, I got to say every time. And at night, you can see the tracers. So you know you did. In the daytime, you didn't see them. So you didn't know you were getting shot at. But I'm damn sure George and I were shot at nearly every mission in Laos by AAA, 23 millimeter for the most part.
Can I ask you how sturdy these planes were? In other words, could they be hit a lot and remain flying?
I'll let George answer it, but the F-4 had a lot of stuff in the wing. The older aircraft that were flying had hot air in the wings. I didn't fly any of those. I was flying, and George knows what I'm talking about, slat F4s. So we didn't have that. But there was a lot of hydraulics and fuel and a lot of stuff in the wing and the fuselage of the aircraft. I'd have to say, and George can jump in, I'd have to say the F4 was not a sturdy aircraft to get hit. You didn't want to get hit in the F4. And as everybody here may knows, and George, I flew A-10s for 7 years following it. Nothing like what the A-10 could take, not even close. So
Not even close.
the F4 was vulnerable.
Okay.
That's my opinion. George can jump in.
George?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depended on where it was hit. Like we had one airplane come back with a hole up through the wing. I think it was about where the gear went up into the wing there, and it was big enough that you could stand up in it and you would be able to bring the airplane back and safely land it. Whereas other airplanes, I've heard, they went down because of a small bullet hole that just happened to hit a hydraulic line or some critical component. So yeah, it was a matter of where the bullets hit, I guess. But I'd like to go back to what you mentioned about in Laos there, if I may. One of the interesting search and rescue missions that I had taken part in was, and the fellow's name was Woody Bergeron, and I don't know if he's part of this group or not, but I remember it well because he was down over Laos for 3 days. Oh. I give the rescue people a lot of credit, and I'm not sure if there's a book written on it yet or not, but the front seater was killed, and the rescue continued. As long as they could talk to him, they would do everything they could to try and get him out, and it was finally successful on the 3rd day. And so he had quite a story to tell.
Woody Berger is his name.
Bergeron, Bergeron. I know he's still around because I think I saw him on Facebook here not too long ago.
Ron Soriano, I see you nodding your head to a lot of this. You put in the chat that the A-10s were built to take punishment, unlike the F-4s. What was your experience with these aircraft?
My experience was in the KC-135. They were always hanging on the wing.
Right.
But I was not in Vietnam. I got in just as it was winding down. But I was out of Travis in California. We did a lot of the envelope expansion for refueling with Edwards flight test. And the A-10 was one of the ones, A-10, F-16, all of those earlier aircraft, including the B-1, the AWACS, I don't know. There was a bunch of them that we would, 1/3 of our mission was to support Edwards flight test. But just reading about the A-10, the design criteria was specifically to do the F-105 and the F-4 job and take the battle damage.
Right. Caleb Craig, thank you so much for letting me know that Larry Kilmeyer had his hand up. I didn't see that initially. Connor, I will be getting to you. I know you have a couple reports you want to give to us on a couple of World War II veterans that you've spoken with. Well, one certainly that you've spoken with recently, another whose birthday is coming up this week. Larry Kilmeyer.
Good evening. For both of our F-4 pilots flying, and I understand flying over Laos, but that each of you, both George and Larry, did you encounter air-to-air combat besides your ordnance being dropped on the trail? And the reason I asked that is I was at Cameron Bay, but that runway was shared with the Navy and the Air Force. And I clearly remember a pilot coming back. I don't know the details of it, but I was told he became an ace that day, and he strafed as low as you could down the runway and put that F-4 on its pipe and just straight up and disappeared. So I don't know. I'm just asking. I understand your mission, bombing the Ho Chi Minh Trail, but did you encounter MiGs or whatever.
Yeah,
Both-
great
for both of
question.
you.
Yeah. Did you ever encounter enemy aircraft coming at you?
Todd, I'll jump in because I was a year ahead of George. I was there in 1970. And if you recall, which I know you know, we were standing down. We weren't allowed to fly in North Vietnam unless it was just on reconnaissance missions. We weren't allowed with the ROE, rules of engagement, to do anything unless you were shot at. The closest I came, which is not much of a story, I was up escorting a C-130 that was dropping pamphlets way up in the northern part of Laos. So it would float into North Vietnam, and they launched 2 MiGs. This was during the time they launched 2 MiGs out of Hanoi, heading our way. We headed towards them, both going as fast as we could until they hit the border, and then they turned around and went back. So my adrenaline was pumped up as a backseater. We were locked onto the aircraft, George. We were armed, we were ready to go, and we were not cleared to fire. So we turned around, and I did have 5 missions in North Vietnam where we escorted either RF-4s or early on the RF-101 when they were taking pictures and flew over the runways, looking at the aircraft and looking at the SAM sites that were being built up in North Vietnam in 1970 that later shot down Corky's B-52s during Linebacker 2, and we couldn't do a damn thing about it, just take pictures. So I was there in 70. Maybe George has better stories.
Yeah, my experience was similar to yours. The only time I encountered any MiGs was on a SAR mission, and it was close to North Vietnam, and we were flying MiGCAT for that SAR effort. And then some MiGs came up and tested us, but we never really engaged them. So there really wasn't a air-to-air engagement at all. Yeah, with regard to the MiGs, I think they had a limited range, so they really didn't come too far south. They stayed up mostly around Hanoi. So yeah, I never really.
George, you have a wonderful video available on your site. It's also on YouTube. Is this looks like home movies from Da Nang Air Base in Vietnam, and you are in it. Was this taken with your camera? I just thought I'd play it here and we could talk over it.
Yeah, it was a Super 8. It was one of those handheld movie cameras. So the resolution probably isn't the best, but that was just outside the gate of Da Nang there. That was
Looks like a thriving metropolis.
Oh, there was a pretty significant population right outside the gate there. So,
Yeah. Have you been to Da Nang since then?
No. No.
Would you ever want to go back?
Not really.
Okay.
I guess I've seen enough of it. I don't.
Yeah.
I think my son and his wife said they would like to take a trip to Southeast Asia and probably stop by in Vietnam. But yeah, I don't need to.
I got to tell you, George, the Veterans Breakfast Club has done 2 trips to Vietnam with veterans, and Da Nang is absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. It is, I mean, it's a showpiece city. It's kind of like, I think we said, like, kind of like Las Vegas and like Myrtle Beach put together. The beaches are beautiful. The buildings are beautiful. It's one of the clean cities in Vietnam. You wouldn't recognize it at all. So here is F-4 approach for landing.
I agree. We used to take a red truck over to China Beach, which was fairly close to the base there, and sometimes have dinner over there. But we didn't do it too much because some of the folks weren't real friendly towards us, and was a little concerned about having things thrown at us or whatever. So we didn't do it too much.
So you did a year tour, I take it, 12 months, 207 missions over, 2 years. That's about one every other day. Was that about the frequency?
Yeah, that's probably about right. Yeah. Some days we sat alert, so there may have been 2 missions for that day, but for the most part, that's about how it averaged out.
And I'm sorry, please pardon my ignorance with these questions. But is like an F-4 pilot's job in Vietnam, is it you're kind of on call to be ground support, or is it scheduled missions that have, target zones, you have the ordnance that you're going to drop, and then you're going to return to the base, a sortie out, one sortie back, and that's it, or a sortie out and then you return, or is it kind of you're on call to be ready to go and support ground troops?
It was both.
Both.
I think most of the missions over Laos were scheduled, and the ones I flew over North Vietnam were all scheduled missions. But there was a variety of missions, and once the rainy season hit Laos, to where the traffic coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail slowed down, by then most of our missions were in support of the friendlies in South Vietnam. So, and then also at that time, Nixon had ordered the invasion of Cambodia. So we had a number of missions over Cambodia to clean out some of the North Vietnamese supply depots over there.
What are we looking at here, George?
Oh, this was an army base on top. It was on a mountaintop. So there was 2 good deal trips. We call them good deal trips. One of them was to an aircraft carrier, and the other one was to go out and visit the army out in the field. And it rotated. And when my turn came, I was kind of hoping to go to the aircraft carrier, but when my turn came, I ended up going to the army outpost, and that was really quite interesting. It sat on top of a mountain, and so the army showed me a good time out there. They gave me a good tour, and I got to learn a lot about what they do out there. So this is showing some of the agricultural areas there, looking down from the top of the mountain. This is the helicopter ride, I think, coming back from up there.
So this was like a field trip for you? Is that what you're saying? That like just for fun, you went out in a helicopter to an army base on top of a mountain?
Yeah.
Just for the fun of it, just for something different?
No, I guess you could call it that. Yeah, but it was kind of a learning experience too.
No doubt, it's a learning experience, George. I'm just, oh, there you are. Look at you.
I got a real appreciation for what the folks in the army did out there.
Oh, is that neat?
This probably isn't going to turn out too good. I tried to take a movie while we were doing a bombing pass, and we were pulling a few too many G's on a pull off from the target. And
that is really cool. What's the connection? That's the refueling?
Yeah, we almost I would say, well, probably 100% of our missions over Laos entailed air-to-air refueling. So we went over and hit the tanker first, and then went in to our target area. So that airplane is loaded with looks like 500-pound bombs.
Right here. You see the ordnance underneath right here.
Yeah.
George, by now you know that I ask stupid questions. Did you enjoy flying missions?
I don't know if I can say I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I think it was, I was certainly anxious to get back home again.
Okay.
So it's, yeah, I don't think it was, I wouldn't classify it as an enjoyable time. Fortunately, we had a great group of people to work with. We had just outstanding camaraderie amongst all the pilots. It didn't matter if you were a major or a lieutenant or a captain. We all got along great, and so that part of it was enjoyable. But the missions themselves, getting shot at and losing some of your cohorts, that was kind of a downer.
Did it ever dawn on you that it could have happened to you? That one of those SAMs or one of those anti-aircraft shells could bring you down, and you made it without a scratch, but there were no guarantees of that. And how did you deal with that fear?
Oh, we talked a lot about it. A bunch of us guys would get together in our rooms, and we'd sit and talk about it. And I guess I had a mental plan about what I would do if I got shot down. So it was, just kind of keep your fingers crossed that it never happened, I guess.
What was your mental plan?
Well, we all carried 38s. And I'm not sure why. I'm not sure how I would have used it, but knowing that we could possibly be tortured if they got to us, that was probably a little bit disconcerting. But my plan, I guess, would have been to either try and shoot it out with them, or until they eventually got to me, or I wasn't going to use the 38 on myself, because that's not part of my Christian belief.
Right.
And so I guess I would have just endured it. And hopefully it would have ended fairly quickly.
Oh boy, that's a grim prospect to have to consider. Joe Tedeschi, how are you, Joe? Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Joe is going to be our guest coming up here. I'll ask you to unmute.
Okay.
There we go.
There we are. Yeah, I want to say hello to George. We've corresponded, and I read your book, George, and it really is everything that Todd said it is. I guess my thought is, reading it though, that relationship between the guy in the back, the gib, I love that term, and the aircraft commander is pretty important. And I know you dwelled on it in there. Did you have a choice of you're flying a partner for each mission, or did just the op order came down and that was it?
Well, the squadron scheduled the pilots for the missions, and so I didn't really have a choice. I guess the scheduling officer decided who we flew with, but they usually tried to pair an old head with a new guy. So if I had been there for 2-3 months, I'd probably be considered an old head, and then I would fly with a new AC. And vice versa, if I was a new guy in the back, then they'd pair me with an old head AC. But there was some guys that I flew with for a number of missions, and really enjoyed flying with everybody that I was paired up with.
And what was the job of the gib, the guy in the back seater? What did they do?
Well, we had the radar and the navigation system back there, and we were a backup for the AC, I guess would be one way to say it. So when on the run-ins, we called out the altitudes and the time to pickle
that
pickle the bombs. And if the AC got distracted or something happened to him, we had to be ready to take over control of the aircraft.
And this is a picture, I believe, of the last active F-4 in the U.S. Air Force, right before its last run in 2017, I think. So that would have been almost 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's got the sharp teeth. It looks like it's got the gun on the nose.
Yeah. Let me ask, does anybody else have comments or questions for George before I go on to ask him more about his young life growing up? Because a lot of the book is about growing up on a dairy farm, a family dairy farm in Wisconsin. No indoor plumbing, a lot of chores as a very young kid. He's driving around an 1,800-pound tractor at age 8. It's quite a picturesque life, and it's where his family had lived for 100 years by the time George came around. And George, your father expected you to take over the family farm. But it sounds like that plan was dashed almost one day when you heard a loud sound over the farm as you were out doing some work.
I didn't study very much in high school, and so a paper was due in English class, that I decided to take an easy way out. I copied a girl's paper, and of course the English teacher saw that right away, and she was going to flunk me for the course. But anyway, my dad arranged for me to get some additional help, and I had to rewrite a paper, and so I selected as a subject the investigation of aircraft accidents. And so I wrote a letter addressed to anybody at Truex Field in Madison, and it landed on the desk of the flying safety officer there. And he wrote back to me and said he wanted to come out and pick me up and take me down to the base and show me the F-102, let me sit in it. And well, it was sometime after that, I was in the back field combining grain, and my dad's combine, he had a large engine on it, and then I had the engine from the tractor was running at full throttle, so it was making quite a bit of noise. And all of a sudden, this noise came out of the sky there, and it just really was booming sound, flew right over the top of me. And I looked up, and here was this F-102 coming across. And so that got me pretty excited about being a fighter pilot. And then the rest of it is kind of history, I guess.
So you were angling from that moment on to kind of get off the farm and to get in a plane if you could.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I wasn't very well prepared for becoming a pilot. But so part of the story I want to come out, maybe this will help young people too, is that if you have a goal in life and you've got a strong determination to reach that goal, then go for it. And so that's what I hope comes out of this story as well.
I can't help but think, George, as I was reading it, that even though it seems that farm life, isn't good preparation for what you did in the air in an airplane, in another way, kind of the values that were instilled in you, I would imagine, the work ethic, certainly the ability to deal with danger and fear. I mean, farm work is by far the most dangerous occupation in the world. Do you think that your upbringing kind of prepared you well for the life you would lead as a pilot?
I think the fear part is accurate there. That I was kind of fearless back then. We did some crazy things on the farm, and probably some things I did that probably should have had a different outcome. But I was fortunate and was able to continue on and do what I wanted to do.
I see we have Rich Gotch is with us. Hello, Rich. Rich emailed me a story involving F-4s. Rich was an officer in Vietnam, Army officer in Vietnam, working with Arvin. I'll share his photo here. Rich, are you still with us?
I'm with you.
Hey, how you doing, Rich?
All right. My video and audio keeps freezing up, so if I lose it.
Okay. This is you in a quieter moment in Vietnam?
Yep. I was out on patrol, and being with the Vietnamese, I was one of the tallest guys in the world there. So first thing you do when the column stops, you sit down. You don't get shot that easy then.
Yes, that's right. It makes you a big target. Here's another one of you getting the CIB, I guess.
Right. Being pinned on by one of our illustrious majors at that time.
Whose name was?
I keep forgetting the guy's name.
Does anybody recognize him? Speak up if you do. He was
He's from,
Is that Schwarzkopf?
That's Schwarzkopf.
yeah, yeah.
That's Norman Schwarzkopf, a bear of a man.
Yeah, can you imagine them sending him out with the Arvins? And the average Arvin guy weighs like 85, 90 pounds.
Yeah, Schwarzkopf was gigantic. And there he is, a major pitting you with the CIB. You had a story to share about an F-4 calling in F-4 support. Was it the Battle of Son Bay? Is that how you pronounce it?
Song Bay. Well, it wasn't. There was a lot of battles of Song Bay.
Right.
But I was located in 3 Corps on the Fishhook near the Cambodia border.
I'm thinking if you're looking at, I have a map here. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Rich, but I just want to let people know I have a map here, and I believe this is about where Son Bay is. It's lower 3 Corps. Oh, we lost Rich.
I'm on an iPhone.
Oh, okay. There you are. We hear you now.
Oh, there's your point. Down, keep coming down. Yeah. I lost you. Yeah.
Okay. We will be a little patient with Rich. I know. I think we're having a little delay here. But Rich, just
I lost
start
you,
telling
Todd.
your story. There we go. How about now?
I'm back. I'm kind of back. There you are. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Just start telling your
Oh, there
story.
you are. There's a VA come down overnight.
Oh, we can't hear you, Rich. It's all
Down there,
breaking
it's
up.
places were dumped to. They had a regiment that came down overnight, and it was Song Bay. And my 4th of the 9th, the Arvin battalion I was with was between the NBA.
Rich, you're absolutely breaking up too much. I'm sorry about that. Tried to hang on for that story. Maybe if you get a better connection. But I think it's when the F-4s came for the rescue at Son Bay when he was serving there. Let's go to Connor. Connor, you've been patient. I know you've been having your hand up. I should let people know Connor Ritchie, 16-year-old. Are you still 16, Connor? Oh, you have a birthday coming up, don't you? You're going to be 17. Connor's going to be 17 this week. He lives in Lafayette, Louisiana. He loves to talk with veterans and he loves to get their stories. He finds illustrious World War II veterans, calls them on the phone, does extensive interviews with them, and learns a lot about them. Connor is also going to be featured as one of our contestants on January 22nd, Saturday, January 22nd, when we have a special Jeopardy, VBC Jeopardy game show on Saturday night, January 22nd. I'll talk more about that in the future. How are you doing, Connor? Why don't you tell us about a World War II veteran and actually a 3-war veteran you've talked to recently?
Well, his name is Lieutenant General David Grange Jr. He wanted to join the Marines. He was almost full F. He had an injury when he was a young lad. So he kicked him out, put full F on the stamp. He was very devastated because he couldn't serve. So they asked him to put an A1, they stamped A1. That's General Grange when he was a 3-star, and that's him when he was in France as a paratrooper. But he wanted to join the Marines because they had Marines in his town that had fought in Guadalcanal, and they were actually killed in action in Guadalcanal. That was some heavy fighting in the Pacific. But he enlisted in World War II in the 517th Regiment as a paratrooper, and he participated in Italy. He participated in Southern France, which is Operation Dragoon, and he participated in the Battle of the Bulge as well, and almost lost his toes because he had frostbite. That was a terrible battle, especially the Hurricane Forest. But the two famous guys, they became generals in Vietnam. They worked with General Seitz and General Zace. I don't know if you know who these are. General Seitz was David Grange. He was David Grange's. No. General Grange's. Seitz was the commander of his commander, and he was his S1 in peacetime in the 82nd. And Zace was battalion commander, regimental XO commander for a while, and he was commanding general when he was in. So he was considered him as his godfather in that time. And in Korea, he was with the 187th Regiment. And the crazy part is, hold on, but he had guys in his rifle platoon, 3rd platoon that he commanded with the 187th, which was an excellent unit. There was senior commanders that were regimental commanders from World War II, and there was commanders that were company commanders in World War II. So they had some experienced guys. One of the platoon sergeants had 4 combat jumps. That two had 4, and then there was 2 more that had 6 combat jumps. It's unheard of. And I have to tell you the story that they don't even record in history books at all. And that's very sad, that many of these men that he worked with 2 colonels at the time, they were promoted to colonels again because they lost their colonelcy rank, and they were promoted to colonels by General MacArthur. And you don't really hear that anymore. You don't hear that recorded in history books anymore. And after that, he was in the Ranger Department. He was a Ranger in the Ranger Department, and the colonel that he worked with was Colonel Kelleher, Jerry Kelleher. He was a brigadier general later on, and he had been in the 1st Division in North Africa. He had been in the 1st Division before that. When the CC camps, the Civilian Conservation Corps, that was an opportunity that many people had no jobs, no nothing, and had these officers to be in charge of these. So the colonel was in North Africa. He was in Sicily. He was lieutenant, then the captain major, and he was wounded in Salerno as a regimental commander, and he stayed in the hospital for a while. And then he was transferred to the 104th Timberwolf Division and had participated in the heavy fighting in the Hurricane Forest. And
so David Grange was a 3-war veteran, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. He retired as a 3-star general, and he is now in his late 90s, correct, Connor? And you spoke with him recently?
He is 96.
96 years old. And another veteran who you've been in touch with, and George Kohn might actually be familiar with him, Bud Anderson. He's been on our program. He was on our program about almost 1 year ago, a very memorable program where he, in a very animated way, talked a lot about his various missions in this P-51 in World War II. He would also go on to serve, well after Vietnam. I think he was a wing commander in Vietnam.
Yeah.
He has his 100th birthday coming up, you told me.
He is turning 100 after my birthday.
So next week he turns 100.
Yes. And he was a wing commander Vietnam in F-105s.
Does this name ring a bell for you, George Kohn? Bud Anderson?
Yeah, it sounds very familiar. I'm trying to place him here now, though. So
he is quite something, and you remind me that we should have him on again, Connor. Thank you so much.
And Todd, I have one thing I would like to say to General Grange. His career didn't end until 1984. So he was brigade commander of the 101st Airborne, had his own son in his brigade, who was a Desert Storm guy. He was Delta Force commander, became 2-star general. And he was General Jack Vesey's, who was chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was a 4-star as deputy commander in the 4th Infantry Division. He knew Jack Vesey real well. Vesey's dead now. And he was commanding general of the 2nd Division, and he commanded the 6th Army in California, and then he retired. So General Grange is a really good friend of mine. And you've heard about the best ranger competition, right?
Yes.
Okay, that is named after him. So he's very active in Merrill's Marauders, which we only have a few left. He's very active in the Ranger group. I mean, the Rangers started when Darby commanded all those Rangers in the North Africa and Dieppe raid and all that. And
how about this, Connor? Could you put in a good word with him? Maybe get Grange on our program sometime.
I will definitely ask him.
All right. Thank you so much.
I'll definitely ask him.
Thank you, Connor. And thank you for sharing those stories with us. It's just, I love when two people with 80 years separating them could have a conversation like Connor has with David Grange about his service. That's just the coolest thing. Rich Gotch, are you back on a different device?
I'm back.
How are you?
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you.
Want me to finish the story?
Yeah, please do. Why don't you start from the beginning, because we didn't catch all of it.
This particular engagement was, I was located in the Song Bay area, which is the official region where the Ho Chi Minh Trail dumps out at, way down south, right? And an NBA division came down across overnight, and it was threatening the provincial capital of Song Bay, the city of Song Bay. There's also Song Bay province, but my Arvin regiment, who I was with, was caught between that NVA and the Song Bay city, and we were in combat with them, direct combat. I picked up the radio and called the FAC for a airstrike, immediate airstrike. And what directions I gave them was that the NVA come in, and what they did was they pushed the citizens out of this little village. And the citizens all run out, clear out of it, and the NVA didn't take up positions within the houses and the buildings. And what I did is I called up the FAC and requested a immediate airstrike with the F-4s, guns only, because if they bombed it, there wouldn't be anything left of the places, right? And part of my transmission, first part of the transmission, when I was talking with the FAC told me I didn't have authority to call airstrikes in on buildings.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt you here for a second, Rich, just to let people know, I think a FAC, forward
air controller.
Air controller. Thank you. Forward air controller is a guy in a plane, and he's directing fighter planes or attack planes to come and support ground troops. And so you're communicating with a guy in a plane who's then communicating, I take it, back to either places in the other planes in the air, or maybe back to a base somewhere to get support for you guys?
Right. And there were two types of, well, I'm kind of weary of my connection here. So
okay.
I'm trying to go through a little bit.
Okay.
The FAC said I didn't have authority to call in an airstrike on the buildings. And my response to him was, he said, it takes a senior American ground commander to authorize that. My second part of my transmission was, I said, who in the hell do you think you're talking to? And he must have me patched through to the F-4s, because they rolled in immediately, and their guns drowned out the rest of my radio transmission, which was saying, I'm the only American commander on the ground. The guns, they took it out, all right. And as part of that operation, I was wounded, and they threw me on a dust off, and I was out of there. Now, there's a sequel to that story. What the whole deal was is that FAC was looking for at least a one-star general to authorize that type of a commitment. Now, me not knowing what the rules of engagements were, heck, I was the only commander there, and the only ground commander, American ground commander. The Vietnamese looked at, apparently that had been going on for some time, that they kept doing that. The NVA would come down, push the people out of the buildings, and they knew they wouldn't get any artillery, they wouldn't get any airstrikes on them. They were pretty much protected within it. And they would stay there until they were good and ready to leave. And they were probably trying to just cover up insurgents with food and so forth around the other side of the mountain in that area. The other part of it was the F-4s came in so fast because of one, they didn't have to have detailed directions on where was the friendlies and where was the NVA and so forth and so on. I just said, take the buildings out. They probably love that. They didn't have to listen to the FAC even telling them what to do.
The target was obvious. In other words, in
Yeah.
this instance, yeah. Now, did you get chewed out for having ordered those strikes?
Well, I was dusted off as part of that operation. I was wounded in it. And it took me a couple of weeks to get back to the unit. And here comes my colonel up in his chopper out of Lamson, which was an hour or so away. And he gets me on the radio and he says, he has right mind to remove me from my command position for doing that. And my answer to him was, you put that chopper down, I'll get on it right now. I figured that was the only way I'm going to live through this thing.
Mm.
He didn't like that necessarily, that answer. I looked up, I could see that chopper turn around and head back out. I never did see or hear from him again.
Oh my. Thanks for that story, Rich. Oh my. Let me ask you, George, what was after 12 months of doing these missions, these high stress missions, what's it like to come home and have, I know you're still in the Air Force, but what's it like to come home from war and then kind of live as a civilian again, I guess?
Well, we kind of knew what reception we would get coming back home, and I had to go through, I think it was Travis Air Force Base, and then transfer to a civilian airline, San Francisco. And once I got to San Francisco, I remember there were protesters there, with their signs, baby killer and so forth. But I've heard from, as a result of my book, I've heard from a lot of other folks, and one of them was from a fellow who was a Marine, and he was coming back from Vietnam, and he said that one of the guys he was with was a bodybuilder, and one of the protesters spit on him, and he said the bodybuilder Marine, turned his lights out for him, and so that was kind of an interesting experience that fellow was interested in sharing with me. But I think the hardest part was kind of the silent treatment that we got. It seemed like people really didn't want to talk about the Vietnam War or talk to you about experiences. It was kind of like coming back from Vietnam, just meld back into society and forget about Vietnam. And that wasn't always the easiest thing to do. It was always in the back of your mind, whether you wanted it to be or not.
it's really remarkable, the silence after the Vietnam War. Remarkable to me. I'm old enough to remember it. I was a child, but I know, for example, that there really weren't Hollywood movies about the Vietnam War until the late 1970s. I mean, 10 years or so after you were there. It was almost as if the whole culture conspired not to talk about this war. And the victims of that conspiracy of silence were those who had fought it, because you had this extraordinary experience, this trying experiences, and I'm talking to you as your generation, and yet people like me, even family members, didn't have any interest or ability, I guess, to kind of sit down with you and ask you what it was like. It's hard for somebody like me to imagine what that must have been like. You're almost kind of going through life pretending it didn't happen.
Yeah, I think that was the key. I mean, it would have been nice to be able to sit down and talk about it with people. And, war is not a good thing, as everybody knows. And if nothing else, we should learn from it, learn from the experiences that our veterans had over there. But it seemed like that wasn't the case. And I think that was a time in our country's history where the military was getting a lot of negative feedback. You remember you had the William Calley trial, and you had the Kent State shootings, and you had the guys that bombed Sterling Hall at the University of Wisconsin, and it was all of these negative stories that was being promoted by the media, and a lot of it didn't reflect favorably on our military personnel. And that may have been part of the reason why our general population just wasn't interested. Maybe they had enough of it. Maybe they want to get over it. Move on to something.
Did your parents ever ask you about it, or your sister, or your family?
Yeah, they did. My dad was interested. So we sat down and talked somewhat. And my wife was very, very supportive. We talked about it. And my sisters, they lived in a different state, so we had some conversations about it, but nothing too in depth. I didn't want to really burden them with it either. So I think it was kind of brief conversations, I guess.
Why don't you let people know where they could learn more of your story? You have a website, gwcohnauthor.com. And of course, they could also order your book on Amazon. I highly recommend it. I mean, it's as Joe Tedeschi said, it's a wonderfully, beautifully written book, and it gives you a firsthand view of, what these missions were like in an F-4. Is that the best place that they could kind of order the book and learn more of your story?
Yeah, Amazon is probably the best place to do it. I'd like to make one comment with regard to Joel, and that is I thoroughly enjoyed his book as well, Honor Through Sacrifice, and I appreciate the referral that he made to bring me into your group here. So thank you, Joel.
Oh, I think Joe's book is Rockin' the Clouds, and I think Rob Lofthouse originally made the referral, and he's Honor Through Sacrifice, George, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, Rob wanted to join us. He's going to watch it. He's going to watch it in reruns, as it were. Yes, absolutely. Do we have any other questions or comments here? We just have a couple minutes left before we sign off for the evening. I'm looking around to see if any hands are up. I will let people know that our next program is going to be on Wednesday morning and at 9 a.m. for our VBC Coffee Hour. And we're gonna have an interesting conversation with a man named Art Beltrone, who wrote this book, Vietnam Graffiti, after he was actually a consultant on a movie, The Thin Red Line, about World War II. And this ship, General Walker, was featured in the movie. He was on the ship. He noticed all this Vietnam era graffiti on the bulkheads and stanchions and on the canvas of the racks. And he became obsessed with the graffiti, capturing the graffiti. It was all, managed to collect it all. And it's now part of a traveling exhibit. It has been to Pittsburgh. I've seen it at the Heinz History Center. It really is fascinating to read this graffiti. So we're going to have Art on, and we're going to have Joe Corrigan on, who wrote some of that graffiti. He took the Nelson M. Walker to Vietnam and scribbled on the canvas, and he has quite a story to tell. And so that's going to be our conversation on Wednesday morning, January 12th at 9 a.m. And then a week from tonight, this is really cool. I'm very glad I managed to do this. This group, this all-girl band called the Pretty Kittens, toured Southeast Asia in 1967. They played 150 dates on air bases and army bases in Thailand, Vietnam, and I believe the Philippines. And Diane Cameron, the drummer, second from the right, she is going to be our guest. She was the leader of the band. And I just had a wonderful conversation with her. She shared a bunch of photographs from the tour. And they were 20 years old, 21 years old. Their parents let them go. And she said it was unbelievable. I mean, it was just an unbelievable experience for a young woman. So we're going to have Diane come on and talk about her life in the band, the Pretty Kittens, and share memories. And we're certainly going to be looking for anybody who might have seen them in 1967 in Vietnam. Hey, Connor, you have a book that you're waving around. Why don't you let people know what it is?
It's a recommendation to get Triple Ace and a very dear friend of mine, and I'm very honored to call him as a close friend of mine, Bud Anderson's book. You should get it. It's a really good book, and he's a really good author. And you can go to his website that his son, who actually served with his son one time in Vietnam, called To Fly and Fight with Bud Anderson. It's got really good stories. It's got really good tributes of his buddies who didn't come back. And it covers his background growing up in the Great Depression, World War II, Chuck Yeager, who was a very good friend of his. And it talks about his experience with the X-15 project, with the astronauts, with Michael Collins and various others, and about his Vietnam service as a a wing commander of F-105s, commanding fighter squadrons in South Korea and Okinawa. So he's a really good friend of mine, and I'll try to get him on Zoom. I know you wanted Bud Anderson really bad to talk about his experiences, especially the X-15 project, because it was a really important project.
Yes. Yeah, Bud would be a test pilot. Absolutely. Yeah, that was a big part of his career. Thank you very much, Connor. Thank you for that endorsement of the book. And Corky, you are chair of a big dinner coming up in February if you live in Western Pennsylvania. VBC Chapter 862, the third largest chapter in the country.
Third, spitting distance to the second.
Okay, we'll call it the second. We'll say tied for second. And,
sorry you like that.
And your big event every year is the annual Tet Dinner.
Right, we're doing that at the Fez on the 19th of February. We have an excellent guest speaker.
Do you really? Tell me.
I've been told that. We have an excellent guest speaker. You.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I'm very, very honored to be. It's always a terrific event. I mean, you guys, I don't know how it's going to be in this COVID era, but you guys pack them in, 500 people.
We're selling all the tickets, 480 tickets.
Terrific.
It starts at 4:30 on the doors open at 4:30. Program will start promptly at 6. You're on at 6:25.
Good.
For 25 minutes. We have 4 folks that I've lined up for you that you might be able to talk to who were in country and participated in the Tet Offensive.
Oh, I so look forward to
I'll send you their names.
Very good. Very good.
So we're looking, anybody who would like tickets. I know this is commercial advertisement, but contact 862 or go to the 862 website. And Lee Cofield has the tickets, $25 a piece.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to go or you want to support the chapter, it's a wonderful chapter, extremely active. You can email me, Todd@veteransbreakfastclub.org, and I can send you to the link. I think the link is, I think your website is vva862.org.
Yes, sir.
I think it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Larry is the president of the chapter. They're a wonderful group of people, wonderful group of veterans in Beaver County, Western Pennsylvania.
And come here, our guest speaker anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I'll be having veterans share their stories, which is what I'm all about. So I'm honored to be a part of it. Thank you, Corky, very much. And hey, take care, everybody. I think this is the end of our program. I'm looking around. Any other comments for the good of the order here? If not, then I will look forward to seeing you all on Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. and then next week. Okay, take care, all you.